Air India 171 crash. Preliminary report released by AIIB on July 12, 2025. Background. Air India Flight AI 171 en route to Gatwick, London crashed in the Meghani Nagar residential area close to Ahmedabad Airport with 242 passengers on board on 12th June 2025. In few minutes after taking off, 241 passengers and 20 people on ground died. One passenger escaped miraculously. AAIB preliminary report released. AAIB preliminary report on Air India AI 171 crash. Details of 10 key findings, including simultaneous engine shutdowns, cockpit voice recordings, and safety advisories. The crash, which killed 260 people, marks the first fatal incident involving a Boeing 787. The preliminary report lists 10 findings. Simultaneous fuel cutoff. Final cockpit exchange. Emergency systems triggered. Flight timeline. Partial engine recovery. No bird hits or dangerous cargo. Airworthiness and maintenance. FAA advisory not actioned. Air India and Boeing response. Next steps. Simultaneous fuel cutoff. Both engines' fuel cutoff switches transitioned from run to cutoff within 1 second of each other, an event that effectively shut down all power to the aircraft during takeoff. The first major finding points to cutoff switches operated from run to cutoff, effectively stopping the fuel supply to both the engines and the cockpit voice recorder. A conversation between pilot and co-pilot is recorded in the recording. One of them asked other whether you have changed the fuel switches to cutoff, and answer given by negative. It points that neither of the pilots actually changed the fuel switch position. Report does not mention further causes of this fuel switch cutoff position phenomenon. The switches are spring-loaded to remain in position. To change one from run to cutoff, a pilot has to first pull the switch up and then move it from run to cutoff, or vice versa. The aviation experts said this means if they lost electricity, and cutoff switches automatically become cut off, stopping fuel flow to prevent uncontrolled operation. However, a major software or electrical glitch could still affect their functioning. Only full-fledged investigation can throw light on this point. Very limited amount of fuel samples could be retrieved from the APU filter and refuel/jettison valve of left wing. The testing of these samples will be done at a suitable facility capable of carrying out the test with the limited available quantity. Final cockpit exchange. The cockpit voice recorder captured one pilot asking, "Why did you cut off fuel?" The other replied, "I did not do it." It remains unclear which pilot made which statement. Second disclosure in the report points out to the captured conversation between the pilots. As none of them pulled the cutoff switch, question of manual error or pilot error is ruled out. Aviation experts argue that it is difficult to pinpoint exactly how the fuel switches were turned off. The distinct possibility is software error, electrical and hydraulic failure. Majority of engine parts are badly burnt, so even after reconstruction of 3D model, it will require humongous effort to find out the root cause. One thing is clear, as RAT was deployed immediately, that means both engines lost power within 1 to 2 seconds after takeoff. However, the power of RAT was not enough to save the aircraft from crashing. Also, landing gears were still extended, which created motor drag, reducing the engine thrust further. Emergency systems triggered. CCTV footage from the airport captured the ram air turbine, RAT, a backup power source, deploying seconds after liftoff, confirming total engine failure. Deployment of RAT confirms that both engine lost power immediately after takeoff. The CCTV footage as well as photos taken by general public shows RAT deployed very clearly. But at very low altitude of 600 feet, RAT could not support as there was hardly any response time left, and plane immediately crashed on MBBS College Hostel. Aviation experts suggest that a RAT is a small propeller tucked inside the plane's wing or body. If both engines fail, it pops out into the airflow and spins using the plane's movement. That spinning creates just enough power to run essential systems like flight controls and radios, basically giving pilots a fighting chance. Here the whole sequence happened in few seconds, making RAT utility meaningless as altitude to recover was not there. Flight timeline. The aircraft achieved takeoff speed at 13:38 IST and lifted off. Just 4 seconds later, both engines began shutting down. The aircraft achieved the maximum recorded airspeed of 180 knots IAS, indicated airspeed, at about 8:08 and 42 seconds Universal Time Coordinated, Universal Time 1:38 p.m. IST. An emergency mayday was transmitted at 13:39 IST. Please note report clearly mentions that the speed during takeoff was okay and takeoff happened as per standard operating procedures. Partial engine recovery. Engine 1 showed signs of restarting, but Engine 2 failed to regain core speed despite multiple fuel injections. The aircraft continued to descend rapidly. The finding confirms that both pilots tried their best to start both the engines, but only one engine started partially while Engine 2 was cold. Had the altitude was around 800-1000 feet, there was fair chance for pilots to save this accident. Unfortunately, at 600 feet, they got only few seconds. No bird hits or dangerous cargo. The report ruled out bird strikes or hazardous materials as contributing factors. There was no visual evidence of birds on the flight path. The loading manifest also rules out any dangerous good loaded in the plane. The CCTV footages, photographs, and interview with airport staff and general public ruled out both bird strike and hazardous materials as possible causes. Airworthiness and maintenance. The aircraft was deemed airworthy, with its Airworthiness Review Certificate, ARC, valid until May 2026. Both engines had been recently installed in March and May 2025. In fact, one of the engine was brand new. The maintenance records for the plane did not point it out to any issue in engine maintenance. The crew of the previous flight, AI-423, had made Pilot Defect Report, PDR, entry for status message STAB POSXDCR in the tech log. The troubleshooting was carried out as per FIM by Air India's on-duty AME, and the aircraft was released for flight at 0640 UTC. The aircraft was scheduled to operate flight AI-171 from Ahmedabad to Gatwick with ETD 740 Universal Time Coordinated, 1310 IST. The flight was to be operated by the flight crew comprising an ATPL holder PIC, a CPL holder co-pilot along with 10 cabin crew. Both pilots were based at Mumbai and had arrived at Ahmedabad on the previous day. They had adequate rest period prior to operating the said flight. The co-pilot was pilot flying, PF, and the PIC was pilot monitoring, PM, for the flight. The crew of flight AI-171 arrived at the airport and underwent pre-flight breath analyzer test at 6:25 Universal Time Coordinated and were found fit to operate the flight. The crew is seen arriving at the boarding gate in the CCTV recording at about 7:05 Universal Time Coordinated, 12:35 IST. FAA advisory not actioned. A 2018 FAA advisory had warned about the potential disengagement of the fuel control switch lock. As per the AAIB prelim report, Air India did not act on it, as it was non-mandatory. 2018 warning by Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, that Boeing received reports from operators of Model 737 airplanes that the fuel control switches were installed with the locking feature disengaged. However, this recommendation was not made mandatory. It is too early to come to final conclusion, but some fuel stock locking probabilities and incidences were reported by FAA way back in 2018. Air India and Boeing response. Air India has acknowledged the AAIB's preliminary report into the AI-171 crash and reaffirmed its support for affected families. The airline stated on X, formerly Twitter, that it is cooperating fully with investigators but will not comment on technical details due to the ongoing nature of the probe. Air India stands in solidarity with the families and those affected by the AI-171 accident. We continue to mourn the loss and are fully committed to providing support during this difficult time. We acknowledge receipt of the preliminary report released by the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, AAIB, today, July 12, 2025. Air India is working closely with stakeholders, including regulators. We continue to fully cooperate with the AAIB and other authorities as their investigation progresses. Given the active nature of the investigation, We are unable to comment on specific details and refer all such inquiries to the AAIB, the airline said on X. Boeing also put out a statement following the AAIB preliminary report. Our thoughts remain with the loved ones of the passengers and crew on board Air India Flight 171, as well as everyone affected on the ground in Ahmedabad. We continue to support the investigation and our customer. We will defer to the AAIB to provide information about AI 171, in adherence with the United Nations International Civil Aviation Organization protocol known as NX 13, it said. Next steps. The AAIB has said, at this stage of investigation, there are no recommended actions to be 787-8 and/or GE Inc.'s 1B engine operators and manufacturers. Investigation is continuing and the investigation team will review and examine additional evidence, records, and information that is being sought from the stakeholders. The report also mentions that the wreckage and engine components have been moved to a secure facility for further investigation. The final report is expected within a year. Along with AAIB, FAA, UK and Portuguese team prepared the initial report in a span of 25 working days. Please note air crash investigation is too complex a subject to come to a final conclusion. It may take minimum 12 months to figure out the exact causes involving multiple stakeholders, reconstructions, simulations, and discussions. One important conclusion is both engines stopped almost simultaneously, RAT deployed but due to less altitude and few seconds in hands pilot were helpless. Conclusions. It is established that both the engines lost power simultaneously. A very rare phenomenon. RAT deployments support the hypothesis of dual engine failure. This is initial assessment. It will take at least a year to establish the root causes of engine failures. A tragic incident where 241 passengers and 20 people on ground lost their lives. Dreamliner is an ultramodern aircraft and as such it is hard to believe that two engines can simultaneously went off. Our condolences to the families of the passengers, crew members, and people on ground who lost their lives in this incident.